one of the things I'm wondering there is what am I looking for at the table in terms of getting information about other people's ranges, particularly as their hands that they're playing that then get shown down. I mean, when I think online poker, I can think of a simple HUD that just has the three statistics of voluntary put in pot, pre-flop raise, and aggression factor. Those three statistics tell me a lot about a player's tendencies. But live play and some of the more sophisticated HUDs have even more detailed statistics. But the key thing about live poker is I don't have that information. So I'm having to construct this information just watching a player's tendencies. So what am I looking for to quickly, because there's so much information out there, I can't possibly observe and process all that information. So can you give us some heuristics of what we should be looking for to separate the signal from the noise so we don't get overwhelmed by so much information, but we have enough that we can make some reasonable judgments about other players' ranges?
I think my advice there would be think in broad terms. I don't think it's realistic or a good idea to try to put your opponent on an exact pre-flop range, for instance, to try to enumerate, here's every hand I believe my opponent would call a raise with in the situation. I think it's much more practical and also good enough for most of our purposes to just say something like, I think this player is calling with an overly wide range pre-flop. That already tells me a lot of what I need to know going into the flop in order to make decisions in a practical way. So one good rule of thumb is that you can continuation bet more aggressively against people who have overly wide pre-flop ranges. And the reason for that is just that if you're, by definition, like everyone plays the good hands. So a player who has an overly wide range is adding more weak hands to his range. Right? A wide range is always weaker than a tight range. Everyone plays the aces. Not everyone plays the 9-3 offsuit. So the ranges only get weaker as you add more hands to them. And that continues onto the flop. Because again, like the weaker hands are hands that are more dependent on the flop. I mean, of course, there are flops where 9-3 is a very strong hand, but not nearly as many of them as where pocket aces are a very strong hand. So the weaker your range, the more hands you add to your range, the more you're diluting it and the weaker it's going to be on any given flop. So I'm not trying to do something like look at a flop. And I think actually people get themselves in trouble when they do this. Because sometimes people will look at a flop like 7-4-4 and they'll say, uh-oh, that guy's a loose player. This is a good flop for him because he has fours in his range. But okay, I mean, if he plays king 4 suited, sure. But if he plays king 4 suited, he probably also plays king 5 suited, king 6 suited, king 8 suited, queen 5 suited, queen 8 suited, jack 5 suited, jack 8 suited. Like for every hand that we add to his range that like smacks that board, we're probably adding 20 hands that miss that board. So I don't need to be able to say this is his exact range or do some kind of calculation in my head where I'm counting combinations of like what hands does he have they're going to call on this flop. I just need to say, I know this guy is calling too wide pre-flop, and that gives me a lot more incentive to bet the flop. So anytime I feel like I would have what would be kind of a close decision between betting or checking at equilibrium, I'm going to err on the side of betting because I know this guy is playing too wide of a range